Welcome to another edition of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 37 years, which is, I realized, well over half my life. So, what I want to talk to you about today is something that I had to deal with a long time ago. But perhaps if you're watching this and you've been fairly newly diagnosed, you might be grappling with this issue, and that is, okay, I have a diagnosis of MS. Do I tell people or do I keep it to myself? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I'll tell you eventually what side I came down on, but I will kind of step through some of the factors involved, and maybe that will be helpful to you. I hope so. Well, first of all, why might you not want to share your diagnosis with anybody? Why might you want to keep it to yourself? Well, I know one reason that people have, at least in the past, said they didn't want to share it with anyone at work because they were afraid that they might lose their job. And same with relationships. You might be afraid that if the person that you're dating or even the person you're married to finds out you have MS, that they might leave you. Well, as far as the job thing goes, I know that it's not infallible, but there are legal protections against that now. You cannot overtly be fired because you have MS. But we all know that discrimination can be pretty subtle. And it might be something as simple as you just aren't getting the assignments that you thought would be fun to do or challenging for you. Or you might not be given promotion opportunities like you thought you might have gotten, and that's legitimate. I think it's important to remember, though, that if you have that kind of an employer, maybe that isn't a job that you want anyway. And that goes for the relationship as well. I know that it's a risk that if we tell our loved ones that we have MS, that they may pull back, that they may say, whoa, I didn't bargain for this, because nobody knows what the future holds, right? But the point is that if you don't tell them, and then sooner or later it gets to a point where your disability really does require them to be something of a caregiver as well as their husband, a partner, a friend, they may not be up to that. That may just not be something that's in their character to do. It's just important to be upfront about things. I think in the long run, we'd be happier with it out there, and that way it's an issue, it's been dealt with, and we can move on. Okay, well, what might be another reason that you wouldn't want to tell anybody? And this is one that I really can relate to entirely, and that is that you just don't want people to think of you as an invalid. I get that. It is not something that makes me feel really good about myself if people assume that I'm incapable of doing things that I think I am capable of doing. So that essentially they foreclose certain things for me, even when I would prefer that they not. But is that really the best reason to keep it a secret from people? Stick up for yourself. If somebody says, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, you have MS, say, I know I have MS. That doesn't mean that I can't do this particular thing. I think what they need to do is see you doing things that you can do and doing them successfully. Kind of train people, because they don't know. Honestly, people do not know what it means to have multiple sclerosis. I think it's still very much the truth that people think of people with MS as folks that are very limited in what you can do, and they have to step up and do all this stuff for you. And it may be out of the goodness of their heart, and it may be not, but you may not like that. But again, it's just going to require you doing some training and education. And then finally, the third reason that you might not want to tell is because of your nature. You may be an introvert, you may be a very private person, and though you just aren't in the habit of telling people things about your personal life at all. And this is certainly something that you don't want to share, because it is personal and it might lead to questions that you just don't feel like answering. Okay, I can understand how you would feel about that. But we need to look down the road and see, okay, am I just pushing the can or kicking the can down the road just to make more trouble for myself later if I don't say something about my diagnosis now? And by the way, I think I need to say at this point that my personality type is more extroverted. So quite honestly, this idea of not telling anyone was never a huge issue for me. But I can understand, because I do have friends with MS who are more introverted, I can certainly understand where they're coming from, that it is uncomfortable to be asked a bunch of questions you don't want to answer. So thinking through what still might be the helpful way to handle your new diagnosis. First of all, let's think of some good reasons why we might want to tell people. First thing to keep in mind is that not everybody needs to know everything, and that there are all kinds of people we deal with in life, and not everybody needs the full story. But let's just think through some things. Maybe we should start with the people who do need to know pretty much everything. And I would say that would be your medical team, particularly your primary care provider and your neurologist. And of course, those two probably already do know pretty much everything, at least that they're the ones that were in on the ground floor who helped get you to the point where you got the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, whether the primary care doctor referred you to the neurologist or you went and told your primary care doctor this is what the neurologist said. One way or the other, they both kind of pretty much know everything. And in this day and age when so many doctors' offices are in communication with one another through the computer, automatically sometimes they know. For example, my oncologist and my neurologist are part of the same network in the Oregon Health Science University network, and so it's all one big database. When I go see my oncologist, they already know I have MS. I don't even have to tell them. But in the case where the primary care doctor does not know, I think it's a good idea to keep them informed. For one thing, it may make a difference in the kinds of medication that one prescribes to you or the kinds of physical therapy they recommend. It's important that they know these things. The second group of people that probably need to know or that you would benefit from telling all to is your MS support group. And if you're not part of a multiple sclerosis support group, I would really recommend that you find one. And there are all different kinds depending on who's in the group. I will tell you from experience, some of them are very upbeat and very helpful, and some of them are kind of defeated and discouraged and not much fun to be around. And I would recommend that you not get involved with that second kind because you just don't really need that. But if you can find a group of people who have a sense of humor, who look on the bright side, who like to know what's going on in the research in the field, who are ready to share what they've learned and what they're experiencing, I think it's really, really valuable. And the more you share details of how you're dealing with your MS, the symptoms that you're having, the doctors that you're seeing and what they're saying, the more you will benefit because people will be able to tell you their experiences and how those might or might not match with what you've got going on. When I was in upstate New York, I used to attend this support group that met in person in the days long before COVID, right? But what we have been doing now is meeting through Zoom or some other online method. And that has been really good for me because I've been able to be involved in the group even though I'm now back in Washington State. So those two groups of people, your neurologist and your primary care doctor, and the MS support group members, you could benefit from them knowing pretty much everything. But then let's start to think about other groups of people, and perhaps it's not that necessary that we tell them all. Close friends and family. And you know your own situation, and so what I'm saying here might not apply entirely in your case, but this as a general rule, your close friends and your family, they deserve to know generally what's going on with you. If you've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, it's no different than if you were diagnosed with cancer, or you were diagnosed with diabetes, or you were diagnosed with anything else. It's going to change their lives because they live with you or because they're around you a lot. And you kind of owe it to them to let them know that this is what's going on with you. They also, I think in a lot of cases, really do want to be helpful and sensitive to your situation. So it's just courtesy, and it just strengthens the relationship if you tell them about your diagnosis. Now, having said that, that does not mean that you have to share with them every single thing. For example, you might be crabby, and they might say something to you like, "Oh, you've been awfully grumpy lately. So what's going on?" And you might say to them, "Well, I'm just having some MS symptoms right now, and I'm having a hard time dealing with them." That's fine, but you might not want to give them the actual reason that the particular MS symptom is that you've been constipated for a week. And that's enough to make anyone grumpy, right? But you don't need to tell them that. That's almost too much information. And that's just an example. You don't always have to go into detail about the actual physiological stuff that's going on with you, but just give them a sense of the fact that you've got some symptoms, you've got some issues going on right now, just so that they know they haven't done anything. Because sometimes people think, oh, I must have done something to make her mad at me. Well, that isn't the case, so they deserve to know that. People that you see frequently. So let's talk about people who are friends but maybe not close friends, people that you work with, people that go to your church. I think it's a benefit for them to know that you have MS, but again, they don't need to know the details. Some might ask questions, and you can answer the ones that you feel like answering, but you're not obligated to give people the whole rundown on what your MS exactly is and give them all the medical terminology that they probably won't really relate to anyway. Because it's always good to keep in mind that as well-meaning as people are or can be, they don't really know what it's like to be you. If I had a dime for every time that I said that I was fatigued and somebody who didn't have MS said, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. I'm tired a lot. I'm tired all the time." No, that it's not the same thing. I know they mean well, but it's not the same thing. When I go to my support group and I say I'm fatigued, they know what I'm talking about. When I go to my neurologist and I say I'm fatigued, he knows what I'm talking about. But that doesn't mean that everyone we talk to is that well informed. So just saying. And then lastly, others. I mean, there are other people that we run into in life. Do we owe them anything, any explanation? No, not really. And if we're not comfortable telling them, then we don't have to. Because people we don't see on any kind of a regular basis are not likely to be around us enough to really fully understand what that means. If we just tell them, oh, I have MS, that leaves them free to have whatever mental picture of MS that they have. We're not going to really be around to help educate them and maybe change some of the stereotypes that they have in their minds. So it may not even be worth going down that road at all. So finally, let's just talk about some good reasons to tell people about our diagnosis. And this kind of touches on some of the things I've already said, but my thought in the matter is that it's best to know sooner than later. And we've already talked about that. If a relationship or a job is going to fail because you have MS, it's better to know that sooner than later. And it's also better for them. They have to decide for themselves whether that's something that's going to make or break that relationship. And they need to know that soon so that they have time to process that and think about it. Even if you aren't highly symptomatic and even if your disease is progressing really slowly, it still will change your life and it will change their lives too. And they're going to have to come to terms with that. And I guess in a practical sense, the next thing I would say is that people are going to suspect something's wrong with us anyway, right? If we are not walking in a straight line, or if we're having to rest frequently, or if our cognition seems to be a little bit impaired some days and not others, people are going to wonder why. And they may not think MS. They may think, oh, she's hitting the bottle, or, she's got some other issue going on that we kind of really don't want them to think. So it might be best if we tell them what it is, and that way it satisfies whatever thought that they might have been having. At least it gets them more on the right track. And that's, I think, all to our good, if not for their good as well. Another thing that I have found when it comes to my friends knowing that I have multiple sclerosis is that they actually have made problems go away before they even become problems. And I think I've said this before, but since I don't drive anymore, it's been wonderful that my friends who know I have MS ask me, can I pick you up? Or would you like me to come by and pick you up? Or when do you want me to pick you up? It's no longer necessary for me to ask. One time I went to the women's retreat before most of the folks in the group knew that I had MS. And the rooms that we rented to share were kind of up on this set of flagstone steps, and it wound around, and here I am supposed to get up the steps with my bag, and it was not easy for me. Now, fortunately, one person there did know I had MS, and she just kind of, without making a fuss about it, took my bag and just made sure I was okay, and I really appreciated that. Now, the next time we went to women's retreat, everybody knew I had MS. They did not sign us up for rooms in an inaccessible place, which I really appreciate. I didn't have to ask. It just got taken care of. And I can't tell you the number of times problems that I probably didn't even realize could have been problems just didn't end up happening because people made different arrangements, thinking of me and thinking of my needs. And I only could reap that benefit because I shared with them that I have multiple sclerosis. And now we're going to get into some that I think are a little bit more psychological, but that doesn't make them any less important. And the first would be that keeping it hidden takes a lot more energy to pretend that you're fine, or to keep making excuses for yourself that don't let the cat out of the bag that you have MS. It's tiring. It takes more energy to pretend that you're not struggling. It takes more energy to pretend that you don't need to rest, that you don't have trouble balancing. Those things take more energy than we probably want to expend. And also, I think keeping it hidden, and this for me was probably the biggest reason that I did not keep it bottled up. I did tell people that I had multiple sclerosis, was that by keeping it hidden, you kind of create it into something with more power, with more monstrosity than it really even has. But because you're carrying this burden to yourself, it's like it gets big and scary. I thought, no, there's no reason to be carrying this around as if it's some horrible thing. Just talk about it, and then all of a sudden it's like you've diffused the power that it had. I found that to be true almost immediately. As soon as I talked a little bit about it to people, I realized I had taken away its power to frighten me and control my life. So maybe for all the reasons I've given you, that's the single biggest reason to have told people about it. Mental health is really important. We all know that depression is more common in people with multiple sclerosis than it is in the population at large. And that's saying something, because lots of people in the population say that they've been dealing with depression. So anything that we can do to not put ourselves in that vulnerable place where we can become depressed, we need to take that seriously. We need to do something about that. So by holding it inside that we have MS, by feeling like we have to pretend, I think we're setting ourselves up for depression. Let's not do that. I think that's important for our own health and for the sake of the people that we love and care about, because they're going to suffer if we're suffering. I don't know how better to define what love is than that you would suffer if someone else was suffering, just as you would rejoice if they were happy. So for the sake of ourselves and our loved ones, let's not hide the fact that we have multiple sclerosis. Well, this was just my rambling about this. How do you feel about it? Do you agree? Should we be telling people we have it? Have you tried to tell and felt like you got burned because you told? Have you been keeping it a secret? Has that worked for you? I'd really love to know. So leave me a comment. I'd love to hear it. Well, that's all I have for you today. Take really good care of yourself, and I will see you again in my next video.